What the Falcons do? Rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, the lifelong sports fan and the Golden Hard Dog. So guys, just wanted to come today and talk to you about the 2023 AFC South. I've already completed the NFC discussion for all four divisions. I kind of mentioned the NFC South and the Falcons. I may go back and do a little bit more deep dive on that later. But I want to get through the next four divisions, and we'll start with the AFC South, probably the weakest division overall here that we're going to be looking at. Maybe the weakest in the NFL this year, but they all are on a trajectory where they could get back to relevance within the next couple of years. We're going to start out by saying that they all play each other twice in the division, so that's 6 games for each team. They all play the AFC North, which is the Browns, the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Bengals, and then they also all play the NFC South, which most of the time, if you were just going by last year, this would have been a fairly easy group to play, or they might have been fairly evenly matched. This year, I do think the NFC South is a better division as a whole than the AFC South, who are very top-heavy with one favorite and a bunch of other guys that I predict to finish in the bottom 10 overall. But let's get started here. I'm going to talk about each of their individual 3 games that they get that are unique from everybody else. We'll talk about some different things for each team that are going to matter this year, and then we're going to talk about their floor, their ceiling, and what I predict them finishing. So, starting out, we're going to go with the Colts. The Colts are probably one of the most disappointing teams from last year. I thought Matt Ryan was going to come in and be great for him because he was not bad in Atlanta. He just was not the same level of good as he had been with our Super Bowl run. But no, he was just bad last year. So bad that he is now going to be in an announcer's booth this year. Unless something crazy happens with the Raiders where they might have to go and look for him. Jimmy G cannot pass his physical, which as of the making of this video, he still has not done. And Matt Ryan would still be a better option than anybody that they have as a backup there. But Colts are going to get the Rams, who I still don't know much about. I think they could be good. They're going to get the Patriots, who are going to be probably better than the Colts. And they're going to get the Raiders, who, honestly, I think are probably better than the Colts as well. So, you're looking at some different things here. They have a new coach, Shane Steichen, who's the former offensive coordinator for the Eagles. That certainly brings a lot of hope in terms of what they're going to do on offense. Their defense left a lot to be desired, particularly in the pass rush last year. They finished just above the Falcons in terms of grading, which was not good, finishing at 30th instead of 31st like the Falcons did. So not very good at all from that standpoint. So their season is going to go on how their rookies and how their veterans combine and mesh well together. If the veterans have a resurgence, such as Jonathan Taylor, if he turns out to be good, if he can get over his lagging injuries, if the offensive line can be good, they went from being like a top 5 offensive line to being a bottom 5 offensive line out of nowhere. Quentin Nelson was not good last year, and he's been the anchor there. I don't know what the deal is with their offensive line, but I'm hoping that they can just get everything back together and mesh well. If they do that and they can stay healthy, they certainly have a chance to get closer to their ceiling. And then they're also going to live and die by Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is probably one of the biggest boomer bust top quarterback prospects that we've seen in a while. Could be amazing. Could be terrible, and there's not probably going to be a lot in between. He is going to be thrown to the Wolves here early on, but again, just looking at their schedule, they also have a wide receiver room issue that they're going to have to deal with. They don't have any true solid number 1 guys there, so he's going to have a lot to, Anthony Richardson's going to have a hard time trying to make something of himself here. But looking at their floor, I think 4-13. If you really just look at everything, I don't think they are going to finish worse than they did last year, but I think you still have that 4-win floor, so 4-13. I think the ceiling is about 11-6, just because I don't see them beating the AFC North. They could get manhandled by some of the teams in their divisions, particularly the Jaguars, a couple of times. They probably aren't going to beat everybody in the AFC South, but let's just say they swept them. You probably could get to 11-6 maximum, but I think they're going to finish closer to that floor, which I have them finishing 6-11. Moving on, we have the Titans. Titans are a team that has gone from being the top of their division to slowly but surely declining. That has to do with King Henry's health. And again, he's not a bad running back. Certainly he's going to be a guy that's taken in the first round of most fantasy drafts this year. But their offensive line was garbage last year. It may not be much better this year. It's a team that is definitely bottom 10 on the offensive line. They've lost some pieces, and I don't know how well they're going to gel together. They're going to live and die by that offensive line. Their defense was not great. They got picked on a lot last year in the secondary in particular. There's not a lot of names there that just inspire fear when you're looking at them. But again, the teams that they draw, you got the Chargers. They get them incredibly early. I don't think they win that. They draw a lot of tough teams here. They get the Dolphins in Miami, but it's in December, so you don't get the heat advantage. And then you get the Seahawks, you get them in Nashville. None of those are easy teams, and I don't think they win any of them. This is another team that when it's all said and done, again, is their wide receiver room going to step up? Treylon Burks is the best receiver they've got, and he was kind of bad last year, supposed to be the heir apparent to A.J. Brown, and just didn't show out last year. He was hurt a little bit as well. Is Tannehill going to be good, or is he going to give up the spot early to Will Levis, who they got in the second round, that I think is a pretty good deal? They have a middling defense, and probably still going to get picked on this year. So I don't know what to expect from the Titans. Their offensive line could be anchored by Peter Skoronski. It's just going to be a really interesting. They didn't draft a single defensive player, so that defense is not going to be phenomenal. They don't have any new, fresh, young talent being injected into it, so it's going to be very similar to the previous year. Their floor is 4-13. Their ceiling is 10-7, and I have them finishing 5-12. Again, I think this is a team that will be staring at a top 5 pick come the end of the year, and depending on what happens with Will Levis, they're either going to be looking to get a generational offensive lineman, or they're going to be potentially looking at getting a generational quarterback if Will Levis is just abysmal. They did spend an early second-round pick, so they may not go quarterback even if they do have a top 5 pick, but they need to take basically the best player available when it gets their turn in the draft this coming year. But that's all I've got for the Titans. Let's move on to the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans, they are easily going to be a much better team on paper than they were last year, but I don't know that the actual end game is going to be any different. They are going to be a team that I think plays everybody tough, but they did lose their best wide receiver in Brandon Cooks going to the other Texas team in the Cowboys, but I love their draft. I love their draft more than anybody else's because they were aggressive and it paid off. So the Texans, again, we all know they took C.J. Stroud number 2 overall after I don't know if he was their guy the whole time, but they lost out on the number 1 pick because Lovie Smith said, screw it, I'm going to win this last game of the season. So, on track to get the number 1 overall pick, and then they end up dropping back and getting number 2 overall. They get Stroud, who I think is the best quarterback in this class. That's just my personal opinion. I think Bryce Young is a close second, but I do like the measurables of C.J. Stroud, and I like the way he plays better in big moments than I've seen with Bryce Young in the last couple of years in Alabama. Now, they also went and traded up to get Will Anderson, which I absolutely love. I think he's the best defensive player in this draft. So you have 2 guys that could, within the next 3 years, turn into captains on either side of the ball. And that's always an A-grade draft, A+, S-grade, whatever you want to call it. If you can find 2 solid players, 2 guys that are going to lead your team and be the faces of the franchise, that's an amazing thing to do. So I do like their draft picks there. They had another one at the back end in the second round where they took Juice Scruggs as a center, so they're building up the offensive line. Nathaniel Dell was projected to be a third-round wide receiver. He was taken as a third-round wide receiver. And again, it just depends. They get the Cardinals in November, they get the Jets in December at New York, and then they open against the Ravens in Baltimore. So my biggest thing here is scheduling. Could they be bad? Absolutely, they could be bad. They've got a new head coach. I know they're really enamored with him. He's a former Texan. They're glad to have him back. But they could be bad again. So looking at all of the things here, I hate to put their floor at 3-14, but I can envision a scenario where they're still bad this year. 3-14 is their floor. Their ceiling, I think, is about 10-7. I do still have them finishing at 6-11, maybe 7-10, but 6-11 I think is a more reasonable expectation, still better than the previous year, and I think within the next year or two they're going to be competing for their division. But I don't have a lot of hope this year. So you've got 3 teams so far that I all think are going to be picking in the top 10 to 12 picks this year, and then finally you have the team that should win, but again, they play some tough opponents. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars, let's talk about their opponents. They are basically the de facto London team for the NFL, and they are going to have to stay in London 2 weeks in a row to play the Falcons the first week, and then they turn around and they play the Bills in London the second week. They're not even going to get to go home during that time frame. So I think they may have an advantage there, but their non-divisional opponents are the Bills in London. You get the Chiefs in week 2, and you get the 49ers, I think, within the first 9 weeks of the season. I don't remember exactly when they played them, but it was all early on. Those are not easy teams. I don't know if they win any of them. I think they might sneak a win in against one of them. I don't think they win all of them for sure. But you have some different things going on here. They have momentum from last year, coming back from 27-3 deficit to end up winning that football game in the AFC wildcard round, only to lose pretty decisively the next week. But again, the Jaguars, they are going to live and die by their draft here. So they're going to live and die by the draft. They're going to live and die by Doug Peterson. It just really depends here. They did take Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma as tackle. I love that pick. They took a tight end in Brenton Strange from Penn State, second round. Tank Bigsby, a big, burly running back out of Auburn, who will be a nice complement to what they already have. Ventrell Miller out of Florida as an inside linebacker. And again, then they had a ton of late round picks. They had altogether this draft 13 picks in this draft, which is absolutely ridiculous. So they have a huge injection of young talent, and it's on both sides of the ball. I don't know what they're going to be this year, but I do think they're going to win the division. They got Calvin Ridley coming in to join Christian Kirk, which will be an incredibly dangerous wide receiver room. Christian Kirk last year proved why he was worth that contract. And Calvin Ridley has been a solid player when he's been the number 2 wide receiver in an offense. So I think he's going to fit into that role amazingly. They have to get better at tackling. They were the worst in the NFL in tackling last year. So if they can tighten up their defense, they definitely have a good shot here. But when you consider all things here, I think their floor is 7-10. I think their ceiling is 12-5. And I think they end up finishing 10-7 to win the division. But that's just what I think. Again, guys, I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers by the end of the 2023 season. Thank you so much for those of you who have already subscribed. Consider sharing this video with others. It helps the channel grow. But thank you guys, as always, for watching, and rise up.